All right, Russell.
Well, okay. So thanks to modern technology, we're in a suggestion from one of you. We're pleased to have Kathy Millatt all the way across the pond from merry old England, which now I know why she was going to get tea. It's past your dinner time. So Kathy, thank you for being with us today, and I'll let you take it away.
Well, first up, thank you for having me and allowing me an opportunity to talk about one of my favourite subjects, modelling water. I love doing water. So this is going to be really interesting. But if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt if I can hear you. I'm not sure if you're on mute. Otherwise, we can go through them at the end. So I'm going to run through sort of the basics of water and hopefully cover everything. But I think it's a bit ironic calling this water the ultimate guide, because fitting it into 3/4 of an hour with questions to follow is probably not going to happen. But water modelling, why do it? Oh. I'm just going to make sure I can. No, there we go. Well, water actually makes up 71% of the Earth's surface. So the chances are, unless you're doing a desert, you're probably going to have to model it at some point. And even in places which have low surface water, you'll still find it sitting around in ornamental ponds or in, oil drums full of manky water. So it's certainly something you can squeeze onto almost every layout. But I've noticed that some people seem quite scared of doing water. And I think they think of it as massive resin pores that are going to leak everywhere and cause chaos. And actually, water can be a lot simpler than that and doesn't have to be chaos. So first up, the first thing you need to think about is planning. You need to think about water when you're planning your layout, probably, because water is at the bottom. It's at the bottom of your contours. You don't get a lake on top of a mountain. Now, you may get rivers running down mountains and lakes partway down, but definitely you don't get a lake at the top of a mountain. And unless it's man-made and it's got built-up sides, it's rare that your water won't be in one of the lowest points of your layout. So it's important to think about where you're going to fit it in when you're building your baseboards. Because if you want it to be lower than your track, you need to think about that before you put your track and baseboards together. And perhaps think of a location you can cut away, that you can put the water in the dip, or just choose to do something like foam and cut it away later. I've certainly added in water afterwards into my layouts. But whatever happens, just remember it's easier if you do it up front. The other thing, I'm going to sort of touch on it here rather than later on, is colour. Now, I've seen some bright blue water in my time, and I've actually modelled light blue, turquoise, beautiful looking with sandy shores. But it wasn't in England. It was a tropical location I was modelling. Round by me, and this is the North Wales coast here, it's turgid, the water. You can see the left-hand side of the photo has Photoshop magic of clicking and pulling out the colour. And you can see that the brightest blue in the water is still fairly sludgy. And a lot of it is actually the reflection of the sky and the shadow from the sky. So where it's in bright sunshine, it's definitely a different colour to the darker colours you see when it's in shade. So when you're thinking about water, if you're modelling, we have these things that are canals, and I know you have them in the US, but they're not as prevalent for moving small boat traffic, which is what they were built for in the UK. And because loads of small boats go along them, they plough up really fine mud, and they're always muddy. You can't see anything, and they're the colour of the mud. They're not the colour of water. But if you go to a mountain stream, it hasn't had a chance to pick up a lot of mud, and often it's quite clear. So you need to think early on about, do I want a nice clear stream? Am I doing the coast? Do I want a muddy little hole? And decide what you want to do up front. Once you've decided what you're doing, you really need to think about how you want to do it. So there's a number of products, and I'm going to talk through them so you have an idea what you can use to create your water with. First up, there's always a big debate on should you do acrylic water or should you do resin. Now, I actually do both normally, and I have my reasons for that, partly because I have a lot of resin sat around because I've used it so much. It's not a big purchase for me to go out and buy new resin. I use up old stuff. And the reason I like using resin is it gives a nice flat surface. So I know my water's level because it will go level when it sets. But you can't do ripples easily with resin. I have done them. It's not easy. So you'll almost end up with an acrylic product. And this is a acrylic gloss medium on here doing the ripples in my old Port de Norwich port location. And you'll end up doing an acrylic product over the top of resin to get your ripples. So you may have to use multiple products to build up layers in your water. And to me, good scenery is all about layering. It's never just one colour, it's never just one layer. So the more layers you build up, the more realism you get. Now for here, the resin's only a skim really. It's about 1/8 of an inch deep. I did a couple of pours, so probably maybe 2/8 pours. And it leveled it because this wasn't quite level and it had screw holes and things like that. So it was useful to do. And I put quite a lot of paint in it to make it turgid. You know, that kind of mucky port water. So you've looked at it and you've said, but Kathy, I don't really want to do resin. It's a difficult. You don't need to. If you've got a flat area, you really don't need to do resin. But it can produce results you can't get any other way. So there are two main ways you can model water. The first is to do a solid model of the water. The picture on the left is Trolls Kirk's coastline layout. I went to see this in Sweden. It's one of the most stunning layouts I've ever seen. And he modelled that amazing ocean using flexible polyfiller. And he had a flat base. He used the polyfiller to create the waves, and then he painted them. Now, he's an artist. The paint job on them is better than anything I could ever do. And he's got the colour fading back properly, as you would see with a wave. And that's a very typical colour of the coast around us. He then went over the top of that with a gloss medium and put the finer ripples on. But he didn't create, even though water's clear, he didn't create a clear base. He chose to do water that you can't see much through. So it didn't matter that he painted it. And the gloss for the water comes from the final gloss coat. The right-hand side, and this is the side view of it, I'm doing a clear mountain stream or river. And the point of that diorama is you can see the pebbles and stones through. And for that, you need a clear product you can pour depth into. Two very different types of water and the two main ways you can model. And neither's better than the other. It's really about what is it you want to model with your water. But let's start small. Let's start with something you can put on anything, from the smallest layout up to the largest, a puddle. Now, I like puddles. I like mud. I don't think it's modelled quite often enough. Considering how much it rains in my country, I do feel like we should see more mud around and more wet layouts. And I've added them in anywhere. It's so easy just to drop a couple of drops of a water product of some sort, and I'll talk about those in a minute, into a hole that you have, whether you hollow it out of your landscape or you build the landscape up around it. Here, this is tar grout, my all-time favourite product for any scenery. And I've run a car through it and it's left ruts. And then I've glued it in place. And I wanted to fill those ruts with water. And I actually tried 3 products. You can see 2 of them here. The first was, you can use a gloss varnish. If you're doing a thin, small puddle, you can just use a gloss varnish. And for this, I recommend Tamiya Clear. It's an acrylic varnish, but it's very thick. Most acrylic varnishes are very thin and they don't have any body. But because the Tamiya has got a little bit more thickness to it, it works really well. Now, obviously, you can use household-sized tins of thick varnish, which people do use all the time. But just be careful, because some of the solvent-based ones will yellow quite quickly over time, and your pristine-looking water may turn a bit brown. Now, If you're modeling brown water, that probably won't bother you. But if you were doing a blue sea, you may not be so keen. But yeah, a gloss varnish is the simplest way just to add a drop of water into something. Next up is an acrylic water. And you can buy NOC do Model Wasser and AK Interactive do still water, and Wood and Scenics probably do some as well. You know, every company has an acrylic water product in their range. They're all the rage. They don't have any messy mixing. They're water-based. You pour them out. But because they're water-based, they set generally with a little bit of evaporation as the water comes out. And I find the top of even a small puddle will often end up not quite flat. So you may have to do a couple of layers, but even with 2 or 3 layers, they're not there for thickness. You cannot get a thick water effect with them or a puddle. You really are looking at a thin skim with anything acrylic. The top picture of a puddle here is actually UV resin. Now, you might know it from 3D printers, but you can actually buy UV resin, I get mine on Amazon, for jewellery. And you get a UV torch, and it's brilliant. I use it for all my water effects, practically, that need clear water, because it sets, you can dribble it across things, dribble it into things, and it sets with a UV torch. Now, if it's not quite set, it feels a bit tacky, you can either put it on the windowsill and let it go off, or get a proper UV curing chamber out. I've got a big one that I use for my prints sometimes, and I put that there. But a small handheld torch will work as well with a bit of patience. You can mix in pigments or paint. But just to warn you, if you do that, sometimes you'll get bubbles. And you can solve that by just making your last layer a thin, clear layer. And for puddles, you may want a little bit of mud or colour in your bottom layer just to make it look like it's been churned up. That kind of muddy water effect still. And then the final one, this is a product you can't get anymore. It was Adam Wilder's Murky Water, and it's an enamel water, and it spreads beautifully out. And I wish I'd bought like 5 pots of it when it was available. But again, what I like about this, and the reason I put this picture up, is you can see the colour of it is translucent and dark brown. So you could achieve that same effect if you use the right colour paint in something like a UV resin. And this is just simple water. You can put it anywhere on your layout and make a feature of it. But most of you are going to want to do something a little bigger.
Kathy?
Yeah?
In between slides here, could you elaborate for us Americans what a torch is?
Flashlight.
Yeah.
UV flashlight. You buy them, they're about this big with UV LEDs in them. I got mine from a European supplier, but because people do jewelry with UV resin, you can get them very easily on Amazon or anywhere like that, as well as hobby suppliers, because UV resin sets up with UV light. Okay.
Thank you.
So moving on to sort of the next step up in water. To me, this is flat water. It's easy to do. It's probably the easiest water to do that's a body of water. And you can use it for lakes, you can use it for canals, you can use it for rivers, you can use it for the sea. This is a saltwater inlet. It's inside of a lock, so it's not going up and down a bit too much, but it is slightly tidal. So there is definitely a range of water, and you can see that on the side. This is my old Port de Norwich layout that went in the skip. And I wanted to try loads of new techniques on it. One of the reasons it went in the skip. And so I got a flat card base. I painted it a green that matched the colour of a photo that I had of the area. I've been there. It's a location up in North Wales. And I wanted to show that you could do really good looking water with nothing more than PVA glue, because people seem to think water has to be expensive. And a lot of the products on the puddle pages will cost you a lot of money. But you can go out and buy PVA glue or anywhere. You can even buy clear PVA glue now. It's quite thin when I had it. But you can use it to make water. And that's what I did here. Now, a couple of caveats with PVA glue. Don't pour it on too thick because it does shrink. Don't ask me how I know. It shrinks as it dries. And if you put too thick a layer, it will pull away, sometimes pulling your scenery with it, away from the edges. So build it up in nice thin layers. What you're looking for is the gloss effect. And for the ripples, I had a small glue bottle of tacky glue. It's a thicker glue, a tacky glue. And I just used it to draw these and then went through with a cocktail stick. That's a toothpick for Americans. And you can just draw it through, or something like that, a comb maybe, something that will give a little bit more breakup to your ripples. And then I went over it with a couple more coats of PVA to tie it together. Now, the only caveat is PVA can re-white, it will go white again when you get it wet. It's worth choosing a product like Gloss Mod Podge, which doesn't re-wet as easily, and using that as your final coat. Just makes it slightly more resistant if you live in a humid area. But very, very simple, very cheap. You can do this with artist acrylic and PVA glue. If you want to go at market though, there's plenty of other ripple products you can use to do it. So we're on to ripples. No matter what your base is, the thing that people will see most in your water are your ripples. That's because whatever you've put underneath, the ripples will almost always hide it if you put a lot on. And no water is ever really dead flat in the world. You look at it, it's just not dead flat. Now this, you've seen it already in the wet stage. This is what my gloss acrylic medium looked like when it dried. And I actually put this on with a palette knife. I like using a round fan-shaped brush if I'm doing roundish, sort of like seaside ripples, because you can push in and pull back and get a nice round fan-shaped ripple effect. I often use just a small brush and paint the ripples on. There are many different ways to do ripples, but if you put really thick layers on of some products, they may take months to clear. So it's worth just doing a little test with your ripple products on one side and seeing how long it takes to clear. It was an old bottle of Mod Podge and it took 2 months. It did eventually clear. It took 2 months. But the trouble is they seal from the outside, they go off there, and then the inside is captured and remains white. So what you want to do is perhaps build not too much thickness up on some of the products that take longer to go clear. And there's definitely products that start out much clearer if you shop around. I used another European supplier, Green Stuff World Splash Gel, because they sent it me, and that dried overnight. It was really good. And I bought it in the UK, but I suspect it's expensive in the US. The other thing to mention here is this massive froth, not happy with it. I had a bit of a resin fail. We'll talk about resin in a minute. So that huge froth is actually hiding a bit of soft resin. If you have soft resin, don't worry, cover it up with froth or put something else on top. By the time you've got another layer of resin and a few ripples on top, it'll be hard. You'll be hard put to sort of damage it because you'll have better stuff on top. But I've tried toning this down several times. It was a little excessive. Now, I tend to use Gloss Mod Podge, as I mentioned in the last sort of on the ripples, because it doesn't re-wet as easily. It's a little bit more firm. I also use it when I want fine ripples. And people quite often will blow it with an airbrush. And I've tried that. It creates beautiful ripples, but they're very, very low. You're not getting peaks. So if you want peaks, you need to go for a stiffer gel. A gloss medium type gel, and this one was done with one from the art store. It wasn't a model product, it was cheaper, it was just a gloss gel. But make sure it's one that dries clear, because if they're putting them into artist products, they don't always need to be clear. Sometimes they're slightly chalky when they dry. But the splash gel is probably the best one I've used in recent years. So that's ripples. So we've got up from flat water, which was the last couple of slides, which is probably most of what you want if you're doing big bodies. But if you're doing smaller water streams or shallower water, then I find it easiest to do ones where you're expecting to see the bottom with resin, because you can see through it. And I feel you get quite a lot of depth when you do resin that you don't get with the painted bottom. So I always like to do resin. Besides, I'm doing it for YouTube, and resin always looks sexier somehow than, oh, I painted the bottom and put a gloss gel on. But you can easily do it. Now, what's interesting on here, and one of the reasons this is in, this has got ice on the side of a frozen stream. And I was doing this for a knock advent calendar, and I had about a week to do it in. And they'd sent me the free products. They all had to be NOC products because it was for them. And I don't do things with manufacture anymore specifically for this reason. And I hadn't ordered whatever their equivalent of spatio was. I'd ordered the wrong product from them. So it arrives, I had nothing I could make ripples out of that I had from them. I didn't own anything. And I had to use one of their products. And I was just like, what do I do? So I prodded my resin. And that's what this is. It's not the best rippling in the world ever. For a larger area, it may look better. For this size, it wasn't great. But I literally just waited for it to be almost set. And thankfully, the water they have is about a 12-hour set, so it's not too long. But it was getting to late at night. And I prodded it into the ripples. So you can certainly do that if you're doing resin. But I found it quite hard to time it with the, oh, I just settle back out a bit. And that, oh, I'm going to stay in a stiff wave. And if bedtime gets in the way, I wasn't going to stay up all night prodding my resin for this. So there we go. It didn't need a lot of ripples, and they're actually a bit bigger than perhaps I wanted them. I thought they would settle out a bit more, but it's ripples, and that's what I needed on this particular one. Now, for deep, clear water, there is only really one product you can use. And that is something that doesn't set by evaporation or reduce its volume. So that will almost always be a resin. Not always, but almost always be a resin. You know, any of the acrylic products, which are one-part products generally, they're going to shrink slightly and it will cause problems. And you can't do any great depth to them. But resin sets from a chemical reaction, so it's easier to do the deeper pores. Now, there's 2 or 3 issues with resin. One, it likes to leak, and I've had leaks. So always cover up well, put plastic bags underneath, and never put it directly on your worktop. Always put it on I use them aerosol can lids, and I put them like legs underneath. And then you can see if it's dripping, because even me doing it a lot, I still get leaks on about every 3rd diorama that I do, and that's small. I had leaks on my layout as well. It's hard to seal everywhere that resin will leak out of if you've got a front and a back. Now, if you're just doing a pond and you're worried about it leaking, use something like Shaper Sheet for your base, because it's a solid metal sheet with the foamy stuff on top, that, you know, the fluffy stuff that you then put plaster on. You know it's not getting through that solid metal base. But if you want to add it into an existing layout and it's coming off the front, you'll need to dam it. But to see the bottom, you really do need something that sets chemically, not by evaporation or exposure to air as its setting mechanism.
Kathy,
I'll go through how to do a resin river in more detail in a minute.
Kathy?
Yeah?
Pardon me for interrupting. Russell here. Can you go back the slide? I was going to try to catch it. There you go. I know your talks on water, but it really stood out. Where are you getting your rocks from? Are those real rocks, or because I mean, obviously the whole scene looks very, very natural there, but are those rocks that you just get from around wherever you live, or?
It's Woodland Scenics talus.
Okay, well, obviously then you've colored them somehow.
I'd always paint my rocks. I buy the natural ones and paint them. I love talus for riverbeds because they're rounded, just like you'd see in a riverbed and the areas around it. It's perfect for that. Much better than, say, a rockfall where you'd expect more jagged rock. They are brilliant, and they take acrylic paint so well. So I painted these, and then I put a wash on them, and then I put a green wash on the ones nearest the river, and on 1 or 2 of them I spattered on some lichen, whatever you want to call it, as well, so that there was just a bit of variety. You could even dry brush if you wanted more contrast, but I'm not really a huge contrast painter. So, and then they've been bedded in with tile grout, so they've got a little bit of that around the edges as well, which beds them in and tones them down as well.
Okay, thank you. I guess I just did way back when on that. I just did washes, and it wasn't as successful as what you did there. So very nice. Thank you.
I think my one tip for scenery is do layers. and do more than one technique. I find adding, I mean, the grass on this has targrak put on it afterwards to bed it down around the edges. You know, just keep layering your scenery. You know, one wash on its own may not be enough. You may need to do paint, wash, some green, maybe a bit of targrak which sits into some of the crevices. You know, it is about layering. Scenery is always about adding more layers, not like 1,000, but you know, more than just one.
Thank you.
So moving water, this is probably my favorite because it's very dynamic, and this is a weir. I'm not sure what you call them in the US. We call them weirs here. So this is a mill river canal, and it's letting off the excess water that's not going through the turbine. We'd call that a weir. All our canals have them. And it's no different to a waterfall in many different ways, except it's straighter. And this type of thing, I'll explain how to do this one in a minute. This is actually the product I've used other than resin. This is rubber water. So it's made, it's really great for encapsulating things. It's not so good for where it isn't surrounded on all edges. And I caught the front edge of this with my zipper, and it will fracture slightly. It's quite soft. But if you're if resin affects you, and I was experimenting with this for one of my patrons who was allergic to resin fumes. If resin affects you, then this could be the answer because it's silicone rubber. The downside is it's a silicone rubber, so you know, paint doesn't really stick to it. And it reacted really badly with the products I used to make the water on this. But you know, it's a great option if you want to try something different and experiment, and you're doing really deep water. It's just a little finicky. But you could do exactly this with resin, and I have done waterfalls just like this in resin as well. So moving water, we'll talk about how to do this one specifically. But to me, moving water adds so much. And if you can get moving water in, it adds a little bit more than just a static scene. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. So, white water. If you have moving water, you almost invariably have white water. And the simplest way is just to paint it with a really opaque white paint. I think this is a Vallejo white foam snow paint, which is just high volume pigments. You can also get really high density pigments in heavy body acrylics and things like that. And what you want to do is just create a foamy effect, which I paint on. I have to go over with the gloss though, because this is a matte paint. But when I want huge amounts of froth, I mean large frothy amounts, I tend to get my water product that I've used for ripples or the waterfall in this case, and I add woodland scenic snow. Now, I never use woodland scenic snow for snow because I feel it's a little large in scale for the scales I'm doing. But it is amazing as froth. And I'm trying to start a revolution where people add it in to acrylic gloss medium or resin I've seen it added into, or into anything. This was added into an acrylic hybrid polymer, which is thinnable with white spirits. It's not silicone, and you can use it for gluing. It's called Clear Fix. It's great, but the white spirit reacted with my rubber here. And what's really great about it is the body you get, the fluffiness you get is just, I don't think you can get anything like that waterfall there, which is made of wood and scenic snow, any other way. Said I'd talk about other ways of doing moving water. If you don't have a lot of space, consider just doing a simple culvert or pipe. Use an acetate former. This is just a bit of overhead acetate, but a plastic bag would work as well. And make sure you put a bit of curve in. This, I think, is a little too high flow on this. I think it would actually be more of a vertical dribble. But, you know, have a look at a picture and see how your water would go. It's not going to come out in a straight line. It's going to have either an arc or a vertical drop. So have a look at it and then just use your normal clear product. In this case, it was an acrylic gloss medium from the art shop to create water just running out of your culvert. So I'm just going to run through the two techniques I said I would, because I think they're interesting ones and they cover a lot of ground, or water. So the first one is the resin river. Now, I'm not going to talk much about the base, but you can see my stones there. before I put the water in. And I've put a black wash around the bottom to darken it. My stones are lighter on top. Everything there, it's actually still slightly damp, is just made to go from a dark colour to a light colour within the base, so it accentuates the feeling of depth. For this thing, the most important thing on this slide is the dam. Dams are where you get leaks generally. I mean, this is a solid bit of foam with some sculptor mold on top. It's not going to leak through that. It's going to leak out your ends, and there's a dam at both ends. So top tips for dams: if it's thick, use sheet acrylic, 1 or 2 mil. If it's thin, overhead acetate is great. Use something clear in case you have a problem and you can't get it off. You can just trim it to size and leave it there. This I put on with white glue. I have tried everything. Hot glue doesn't stay hot enough for long enough, and I find I get gaps. I've not had great success with hot glue. I have used super glue successfully. It glues it well, but it ruins your fascia. So I only use it if I'm not bothered about ripping off everything, you know, when I pull it off. I tried UV resin, you know, as a glue, because I thought, well, that's the same as I'm going to be putting there, resin. It worked, but it didn't set particularly quickly. And I think it was on 100% set was one of my problems. So damming is your most important thing with resin, followed by mixing. But make sure you go up the sides. You can see here my glue goes up the sides. If you're filling your river, it will go quite high and it will weep over the top through the thin, narrow gap and come around the top of your dam if you're not careful. So make sure there's plenty of height. Wait until it's dry. The other thing I've used is silicone sealant. If you're doing a river and you've got silicone sealant and you're using that for your waterfall, it's another great one you can use, but it takes a while to go off. So I would dam it a day or two before you want to pour your resin. The most important thing after dams is mixing properly. Most of your problems with resin are when you mix. Now you can see this is magic water. It's a really old bottle and it's gone brown. I'm not fussed, I'm doing a brown stream, but you will get browning on resins if you're not careful. So try and look for a crystal clear one. I currently use a 72-hour setting one. And the reason for that is the quick set ones or some of the epoxy resins will react with your scenery. So the quick setting ones are really hot. They set through an exothermic reaction and they'll heat everything up. And you don't have very long in the pot to pour it. And the bubbles will set into it more. I had a batch that I got from a supplier and he said, oh, this will be fine. But it was really a moulding one, not a deep pour one. And it reacted with all of my scenery along the banks and foamed. Now, thankfully, it was a swamp and I called it swamp, you know, that swampy gunk you get around the edges. And I was wondering how to do that weedy look. Well, my epoxy resin did it for me. And I've never used that remains of the 3/4 of the bottle since. So I use epoxy plast at the moment. It's German. It costs quite a bit. I buy the smallest amounts I can. And, you know, you should do a test pour if you've got old resin and make sure it's still setting. You know, if you're going to pour it into your beloved scenery you've just spent weeks working on, don't chance your resin isn't going to set if the bottle's been open a while. You can have mine go crystallized at the bottom sometimes with some brands. You supposedly can sort it out with hot water, but you end up just chucking it in my experience. So if you've had it open for a while, do a test mix, leave it and check it sets properly. But otherwise, mix your resin and pay attention to the instructions. Some of them are weighed, some of them are by volume. If you weigh a by volume one and think 2 to 1 will work, it may not. If you do by volume something that needs to be weighed, it may not work. So always follow the instructions. And once you follow the instructions, mix it for at least 5 minutes. Add your colours and mix for another 5 minutes. And this is where you want ones with longer pot life so you can mix it well. Having the colour in there helps you see that it's really evenly mixed. And then you get to pour it. Now, there's not a lot of water going in here. And I'm pouring it down this coffee stirrer to make sure I have a nice thin stream that goes in the right place and doesn't go into on the rocks I don't want it on. And a thin stream will help get rid of the bubbles. Now, magic water, which I don't think is in production anymore, That never really bubbled for me. Envirotex Light did bubble. Epoxyplast never bubbles. Really good. So depending on your brand, you may or may not get bubbles. If you do get bubbles, chef's blowtorch is a great fun. Just don't set anything alight when you're doing it. But you can blow on them as well. And it's the sort of heat and carbon dioxide of your breath will pop the bubbles. And if it's slow and you're having a lot of bubbling, come back and check. Now, sometimes if you're doing a really deep pour, I find, and your resin reacts with the surface, you could sometimes do a thin pour first just to seal it. If you're worried about, oh, it's going to leak and it's a large area, do a really thin pour first. And then if it's going to leak, it won't leak very much. And once that's gone through, it fills all the holes and you're going to be okay, because when you pour the next level, it will be fine. And then cover it or you'll get dust. Now, you're going to put ripples on anyway, so dust is not the end of the world, but it is better not to have it in case it's an area you want to be really visible. As I say, I leave mine 72 hours now, and it will depend on the temperature you're in. It will set more quickly in hot weather than cold weather. You'll always get a meniscus with resin, so I just cut it off with a hobby knife and hide it with ripples. It's all you can do, or you can leave it there. You can't get rid of it. It's just one of those things of resin. And resin will creep. It creeps into your scenery. Now, you might have noticed I did this before I did the grass. And that's because I had a shallow pond I did once, and my resin wicked out of the pond across all of my scenery and covered the whole thing in resin. And it's never done it to me since, but I do like to put the grass on afterwards. So I'll often just put masking tape over my river, a bit of kitchen roll or something if it's a big river, and keep it covered while I do the rest of the scenery work. You don't want to be getting scratches on there and glue on there and all the other scenery products. Glue would just be a pain to get off, so just cover it. And that's it, actually. The rest is ripples. So we looked at that a minute ago, but once you've got to this stage, you're on to adding ripples. So waterfalls, this is one people love doing. And for this is acrylic hybrid polymer Clear Fix by Everbuild. It's a UK brand, I think, but it will be around the world. It's nothing unusual. And it's not silicone, but it shares a lot of similarities to silicone, but you thin it with white spirit. So you can thin it down and add the snow to it and use it as a slurry of foamy water. But for this, I'm doing a waterfall and I'm making my waterfall off the layout. Always do that. And use a clear back, either cling film, a plastic bag, or acetate. And that means if you can't get it off for some reason, it's clear. You can still use the product, you just cut around it. And you don't have to just use silicone, which is what people always used. You can use these hybrid polymers, or you can use your acrylic gloss gel as well, because these acrylic gloss gels will build up in layers just as easily to create this. And again, you can mix your frothy water into this now or later. Once you've got it, you can peel it off generally if it's a plastic bag. And then I paint the back with streaky white, so it's not too translucent, because that's the sort of waterfall or weir. It's quite a white one that I'm doing. Glue it in place, and then this is using that acrylic hybrid polymer, but you can use, or it's not an acrylic hybrid polymer, it's a hybrid polymer, and you can, and it's thinned with white spirit here. And you can use just normal gloss medium thinned with a bit of water as well to create this, which is the foam. And then you put your foam all over and around your base, and you get a lovely frothy base. It's robust enough you can clean it and do things. And you can then pour your top and bottom water around it. I always do the waterfalls, install them, make sure that everything's dammed properly by the waterfall, so it will stay, the water level will come up to the top of the waterfall. And then I pour my river, so the waterfall's in the top and in the bottom. And I pour it on the top layer and let it run down the waterfall, which creates a little bit of gloss over the top. So ideas to add water to any scene. We've looked at most of them, but just a couple more. Pipes and drains we've mentioned, but how about a pipe doing really yucky water coming out? Something you really wouldn't want going into your water stream. And this waterfall weir on the back there is exactly the same, but that was done with silicone. And the brown on it is where I've run the resin water over the top, and it's sort of stuck into my waterfall material. The bottom of this one has got some cotton wool on it to do froth. The only trouble I found with that is over time it does dirty up. But I rewhited that water recently. I just went over it with a bit more white paint, and I did clean it. This looks very dirty. I think it was after I'd done this photo, but I cleaned it, and you can just clean your water with cotton buds, Q-tips, I think you call them, and kitchen towels, and just clean your water up. But that effluent pipe is just, again, an acrylic former and gunk coming out. I've coloured the water product I used around it. Bogs and swamps. I do not think there are enough swamps in models. One of my favourite ones ever was a swamp one, whose name has just totally escaped me, but I saw it in a Florida museum, and I saw it in a Narragansett Shortline Gazette, and it was just stunning. I really love that look. But how about adding a simple boggy area? You can just put some ground foam into resin or your clear acrylic products, bit of brown paint, put in your reeds and plants, and just pour it on. You get a really gross boggy looking area by the side of wherever. Wet mud. I've already said I'm a fan of mud, but it's easy to add a clear resin or acrylic product over the top of a mud product. This is tar grout, you know, something to create a nice boggy mud area. If you've got animals that come to a water hole and you're modelling that, quite often that area near there will be nice and churned, and this is the way to do it. If you're doing wet look models, and the rain is in Photoshop on this, but this is Tamiya gloss varnish over the top of everything to get that really wet look. And I do like it. I think it makes such a different style. Doing a whole layout on it may be a bit much, but if ever you do dioramas or you want to try something different, try a wet look. And finally, you'll be glad to hear, water plants. Just a mention for water plants. Don't forget rushes. The ones at the back are bush, grain field and rushes, and the ones at the front are plastic kits of rushes. And then you can just use large static grass. That's what I use for a lot of my reeds. I've handmade out of magnet wire and bits of glue, the bulrushes, and you can buy so many laser cut versions of everything now. Back in the day when I first started doing my YouTube channel, I did a series on water plants, and I did water lilies, and I found 3 ways to do water lilies. The first, a laser cut. The second, I think they're knock. The second lot of JTT, and there were wires with water lilies on. And then the bottom ones I made myself with a hole punch and a knife. You know, you don't have to spend much money sometimes to get an effect, but water lilies in a pond, just 1 or 2 on an edge, can look really effective if they're suitable for where you're modelling. And finally, don't forget that water interacts with the rest of your scenery. So if you're putting trees in, you may want your trees to have their branches going into the water. If you're doing roots or soil edges, just remember, it can be really useful to get them going into the water. It looks like the two were there together rather than done separately. And the same for deadfall, for things in your water. You know, adding depth of field into there really makes a difference. One of my early inspirations for model railways was an old railway modeler. It's a UK magazine from the 80s, and someone had done a rusty wheel in a pond, and I thought it was the best thing I'd ever seen. And it still sticks with me today that we don't see enough junk in our water courses. So there we go. Put things in your water courses if it's a junk area. And I think, yeah, that's the end. Any questions?
Yeah, Kathy Russell here again. Do you find that I guess the way the world is now, that are there some products, either the scenery or the different kinds of you know, water, the resin versus obviously we can get the woodland scenics water over here pretty easily, but again, to me, what makes the water look so good is all your scenery around it. So do you know, is there some products that you can only get in England or Europe that we couldn't get over here, or vice versa?
Well, I don't know that you can't get them because I don't have to buy them on your side of the Atlantic. But I do know back when I was looking at AK Interactive and MIG and Ammo by MIG and all of these products, you guys had never, ever heard of them. Yet over here, they were everywhere. But they were in the military modelling. And I think they came into railways from military modelling. And it was military modelling I saw them in. And they're all Spanish producers. So they were easier for us to get. I mean, Brexit making a difference. It's still very easy for me to get a Spanish product. And they're sold everywhere now in the UK. And I've seen a lot of people in the US discovering them over the last 10 years. So I'm guessing you can still get them. But people say, oh, they get expensive. I have MIG Productions Neutral Wash and MIG Productions Dark Wash. And I bought them at least 15 years ago. And I'm still on my first 2 pots. And I've used them on so many dioramas. You know, quite often these things go quite a long way. But I try and use products that I think are very accessible. So in almost all of my scenery, it's tile grout, the base. So if I look at this, the base of that top diorama, it's all tile grout. That was earlier. That was tile grout. That's tile grout. That's tile grout in the top left. There's tile grout on that one too. You just can't see it. That's tile grout. That's all tile grout. That's tile grout. You can get tile grout the world over. So that's tile grout. That's tile grout on the top right. I try and use products that are fairly accessible. So what I would say is, if I look through my body of work, I have a lot of static grass. Now you can get static grass everywhere. But looking at this, for example, there's a little static grass bush just up at the top right. It's top right for me. And it's static grass with leaves on. I will make little bushes out of static grass now. I also use rubberized horsehair, which I think you can get anywhere. It's actually made from coir. It's called rubberized horsehair, but it's actually coir matting for doing in furniture. And I use a lot of fairly cheap sort of things like jute string. If I want roots or anything, jute string's wonderful. I make my trees with wire, or I use bought commercial ones. And a lot of products I have are American because I went to America a lot. So I would say the paint ranges may change, the products may change, but the model world is actually quite small and everybody copies everybody else. So all of those enamel washes and the weathering pigments and things that you could only really, that came out of Europe, I think they've spread the world over now. And certainly in America, you can get loads of different brands of weathering powders and pigments and things like that. And a lot of the resin I use is not model resin, it's generic, because a lot of art people use resin for resin art. And that's become a lot more prevalent in recent years. So you just need to make sure you choose a deep pour one that doesn't react with your scenery. So I don't think you'd have any problems finding the products. And then I do a whole video on, say, smoothing 3D prints and use spray putty. And I get a barrage of people from North America going, you can't buy that here. And I'm like, oh, that's fascinating because it's like really cheap here and everybody uses it. What do you use in your car? It's a car filler primer, but it's spray putty and it sands better than filler primer because there's no paint to it. It's just made to sand and then you prime. I don't know. You can't get in North America for some reason. So there are things that occasionally don't translate, but you should find everything I do generally.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. Well, anybody out there in the virtual world or the
Kathy White, I just want to say you do some fantastic work, and I would encourage everybody, if they're interested in scenery, to go to your YouTube channel. You do great how-to videos. Just spent hours watching you. I really appreciate and enjoy all your work. Thank you.
Thank you. I feel like I haven't done enough technique videos recently, so I'm planning to do basic terrain ones again this year later on. Loads of new stuff I want to try. Not
Kathy,
necessarily new products. I do feel that it's too easy to reach for the latest product, and they get very expensive in big areas like railways. It's fine if you're basing a miniature or something and you just want a small thing, but if you want to do a whole railway, you need to find cheaper ways.
Kathy, Ed Brennan, I'm intrigued by your comments about puddles. Here in Kentucky, we tend to have a lot of puddles along sides of roads and railway right-of-ways. And when I look at a puddle, if I can find one without a junk 55-gallon oil drum or a used tire in it, I'm surprised. And that with a little bit of jute composition for some reeds or stuff coming up around the puddle works really well. There's something we don't see enough of here.
I think so. I think there's so many commonplace things we just don't model. So one that really hits me is when it rains, everything goes darker. And as it dries, it goes lighter, but stays darker around the puddles. And you never really see people modeling that. Tarmac is especially noticeable when it's sort of drying out and you get dark areas and light areas, and just nobody models it.
In your photo of the puddles, I noticed there's a distinct reddish color that seems to be deep in the puddles that you model. I've been using a paint, an acrylic called Bear Rug, which tends to be a brown and a red combination that looks really good as far as I'm concerned, to my eye anyway.
It's interesting. A lot of puddles, the ones that have been churned up will look muddy, but I find the ones around areas where there are animals often have that really odd brownish discoloration in them. And I suspect it's something running off into them.
Any questions from here in the room?
Yes. My name is Robert Hoffman. I am, and maybe I shouldn't make this my first attempt at doing it, but I'm building a diorama that has a river crossing, maybe 1/3 of a meter wide, 2/3 of a meter deep, and 2 to 5 centimeters of depth, I guess you could say, rather large pour. This is set in a place where a railroad goes over a park. There's always fishermen, people in canoes, etc. I was hoping to, set the canoe in the water, have fishermen standing near the bank of the river. As these resins and things dry, you find that there's a point where it's finally set enough that you can set them and they'll stand up without actually doing any damage.
Yeah, you can. So if you use a really long set one that doesn't get that hot, and I just got mine off Amazon, I experimented with ringing a supplier and got a really duff one. So I just went on Amazon and looked at reviews. People do river boards and things. So there's a lot of deep pour resin out there available, and you want one that says deep pour. But the longer curing are cooler. So you can glue your fishermen in from the start if they're standing in the water casting their lines, and it won't be a problem. Your canoes, 2 ways to deal with it. One, if you don't think it'll be visible, glue them on a little bit of a clear acrylic rod so that the right height and glued. The trouble with that is you have to glue them level, and I'm not convinced I could get them level, but it would at least, I would put in 2 or 3 pieces of acrylic rod so that they're not going to sink down too much. But there's definitely a point. I mean, you saw I prodded those ripples. There's a point where it gets solid, you can still prod it and things will fall into it and settle out. But I'd still probably put the acrylic rod underneath to stop them stinking to the bottom, just in case you've misjudged it.
Thank you.
Any other questions here in the room? I think that means, Kathy, that you covered the material extremely well.
Well, thank you very much.
Russell, anything from Zoom?
No, I think Ed and the rest of them had their piece. Kathy, thank you. I know it's late. where you are now. So thank you for taking the time to talk to us. It was really, really good. We appreciate it.
I appreciate the invite. I love talking about modeling, so it's always good.
Super.
Okay, we'll say goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Russell, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks again.
All right. See y'all.
All right. Fred, say goodbye. We'll see you.